In a given year, Catholic Charities celebrates many milestones. A family becomes complete through adoption. A visitor to our warming center spends a night out of the cold. A refugee settling in our community finds a job. Those milestones add up. And in 2022, Catholic Charities of Southern Minnesota marks another milestone. 75 years of serving the Diocese of Winona-Rochester, reaching out to the most vulnerable people in our community, not because they're Catholic, but because we are Catholic Charities. Catholic Charities was officially incorporated in 1947, but the spirit behind the social service agency started nearly 50 years before that, when three sisters of the Sorrowful Mother moved from Milwaukee to Wabasha to start a hospital and orphanage in 1898. Under the guidance of Bishop Joseph Cotter and Father Maximilian Wurst, they moved into the former home of Dr. F.H. Milligan and cared for 38 patients in their first year. The sisters welcomed their first 6 orphans to the home in 1900. That modest enterprise grew into St. Elizabeth's Hospital and St. Joseph's Orphanage. Until the 1930s, St. Joseph's in Wabasha was the only resource in southern Minnesota for the care of neglected, dependent, or orphaned children. Former residents Pat Skurlinski Goodrich and Darlene Kaminsky remembered their time there as happy, picking out dresses in a huge upstairs closet, going to camp in Frontenac in the summer, and skating on the Mississippi River in winter, not always on matching skates.
We can't really say we were wanting for any material things. The food was pretty good on holidays. At house cleaning time, one nun would come by watering plants, saving a few drops for the children's heads, saying, "That'll make you grow."
In 1939, the orphanage hired its first trained caseworker, Miss Mary Mead, a faculty member at the College of St. Teresa in Rochester. She helped build the social service department, which became a state-licensed child placing program in 1943. The love and respect for St. Joseph's went well beyond its walls. Father Leo Neudecker, the orphanage director and amateur photographer, took this picture in 1941, showing some of St. Joseph's boys and girls posing for the Holy Nativity. He sent the negative to the St. Paul Dispatch with this story to the editors. Mary, delivered of her firstborn, is restful with the peace of divine motherhood as she holds the infant in her protecting hands. Joseph stands as a strong protecting husband, quiet and unperturbed, as he takes the 3 little orphans in their tatters and rags into his new little family circle. Just 6 days after the bombing at Pearl Harbor, the St. Paul Pioneer Press sent this letter. The photo would take up the entire front page of the paper's special segment, printed on December 21st. Father Leo's story, though, didn't make the cut. The caption to his picture, now registered with the Library of Congress copyright, reads, "Beautiful with the simple piety of children, realistic in the setting of an abandoned stable, is the dramatization of the story of Bethlehem by children of St. Joseph's Orphanage at Wabasha." It wasn't until after World War II that Bishop Leo Binns started the process to make Catholic Charities the central agency for charitable programs in the diocese. Catholic Charities Diocese of Winona Incorporated became official on September 15, 1947. By then, the number of children needing care at St. Joseph's had dwindled down to about 20 souls, and the old orphanage building was outdated and outmoded for so few children. That led to big changes in 1950. Under the direction of Bishop Edward Fitzgerald, Catholic Charities bought a home on Wabasha Street in Winona. 3 sisters and 24 children moved into that new children's home in August. That same summer, the agency moved into the Chancery Building on Harriet Street in Winona. 1950 was also the year the diocese held its first annual Charities Appeal, with a collection taken up in every church and institution on Sunday, September 17th. The money from that collection and collections like it over the years has helped the agency carry on its work for decades. And that work started expanding in the 50s to include counseling service for individuals, couples, and families. A little over a decade later, the diocese learned the heirs to what is now the Huff-Lamberton Mansion, just a block away from the Chancery in Winona, planned to sell the historic home. That hatched a plan. The family could donate the building, and Catholic Charities could get a new children's home. The Lamberton Home for Children provided care for children 4 to 17 years old from 1962 until it closed in 1976. Catholic Charities remains a child placement agency to this day. The 1960s was a decade for expansion. The board decided to open offices in Rochester and Mankato to take the agency's mission of child placement, case management, and counseling services to those communities. And the Cabrini Residence, a maternity home for unwed mothers, opened on East 5th Street in Winona, where Sisters of Notre Dame helped young women through the process of giving birth and adoption placement. Sister Caroline Jakubowski was one of the house mothers, who was a Lamaze coach 58 times and present at dozens more births. When the Cabrini residence closed in 1983, she said,
"I have been a grandmother several times. If my dreams come true, there will always be someone to meet the needs of unmarried mothers and pregnant teenagers."
You have only to look at the current pregnancy, parenting, and adoption program to know Sister Caroline's dream lives on. Years of conflict in Southeast Asia created a refugee crisis in 1975. Catholics across the country stepped up to help.
Actually started out really much, the Catholic churches were taking in families and sponsoring these families, and from that, Catholic Charities as an organization kind of assisted in that.
Churches and communities all over the diocese became sponsors for refugees from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. One of them, a former member of the Vietnamese Navy who left his native country with only the clothes on his back. I requested to come to Minnesota because other refugees came and told me what a nice place it was. People tell me they come here and make good friends because people are so nice.
And then in 1980 it became a much more formalized process where the federal government actually partnered with agencies to do a formalized resettlement process.
Now, Catholic Charities works with the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops and the U.S. State Department to help refugees who spend an average of 10 years waiting to call America home.
I think of refugee resettlement program as a builder. We're building community. It feels like you're making a difference. Just seeing these people succeeding, making good life for themselves, you know that you're making a difference.
In 1952, the agency turned its focus to the other side of the spectrum from the children in its care and worked with the Winona Council of Catholic Women to help create an apostolate to the aged. The group looked at what other charity-minded communities did for the elderly among them. They surveyed institutions caring for older adults. They interviewed seniors themselves. And what they found out? Seniors want to be useful to themselves and their community. They want to live in their own homes for as long as possible. And they want to keep their minds and bodies active. That research holds true today and serves as the basis for our current active aging program, helping seniors live independently for longer and improving their quality of life through volunteering opportunities and wellness programs that support healthy aging is not only good for them, but also good for the entire community. Catholic Charities has incrementally added services for seniors since that intensive look called Service to the Aged in the early 50s. In 2004, the agency applied for and received the honor to be the representing agency for the AmeriCorps Retired Senior Volunteer Program, or RSVP. What started as serving only 5 southern Minnesota counties has grown to a 19-county service area, supporting volunteers ages 55 and up in jobs like food delivery, companionship, home repair, and educational assistance in elementary schools. In 2022, more than 1,000 volunteers provided nearly 120,000 hours of service in their communities through RSVP, and Catholic Charities was with them every step of the way. In addition, every week, Catholic Charities staff and volunteers teach evidence-based wellness classes proven to help build people's confidence in managing their health, improving their physical and mental well-being, and lowering healthcare costs. More than 1,600 seniors took part in those programs in 2022 alone, showing that not only is there a need, but that the active aging program works to meet that need. Helping older adults navigate their later years was the motivation behind what is now the Adult Advocacy Program. It began with a grant from the Southeastern Minnesota Area Agency on Aging in 1990. The then Vespers program combined the efforts of trained professionals and volunteers to support, protect, and advocate for older adults who had become too mentally or physically frail to maintain their personal and financial independence. The program started in Winona and Rochester, but it grew rapidly in its first 6 months to cover much of the diocese. Now, as the adult advocacy program, Catholic Charities staff use empathy and enthusiasm as guardians or conservators to serve and encourage all its clients to live safe, healthy, and happy lives. The agency's parish social ministry program also started in the 90s with Bishop John Vlasny, who came to southern Minnesota from some of the poorest parishes in the Archdiocese of Chicago. So he created a position within the diocese and within Catholic Charities to bring Catholic social teaching to the forefront.
We tried to lift up issues, many issues that we still talk about today, immigration and how do we build a culture that cares for the poor, and how do we advocate for the poor, those who live on the margins.
From its beginning, that included reaching out to migrant workers and those living in the most rural areas of the diocese. Through the 1990s, the hallmark of the Rural Outreach Program was the annual Harvest Mass, held in a different community every summer, celebrating the lives of all farming families in the diocese. It also meant embracing the Hispanic community.
What we really tried to establish was a sense of how Catholic Charities fit within the mission of the Church. So there's a way in which you can kind of say, well, Catholic Charities does its thing, the Church does its thing, but that's not really how we want to be. We want Catholic Charities to be integrated into the life of the Church and really to be that witness of justice, of care for the poor within the life of the Church.
The idea behind the MediApps, or Medical Application Service Program, was nothing new in the year 2000. Rising prescription drug costs were already making it difficult for some people to pay for the medications they needed to stay well. The agency's new executive director, Bob Tariba, brought the idea of a program he'd seen do great work at Catholic Charities in Springfield, Illinois. That's how the MediApps program started, helping lower-income uninsured or underinsured individuals in the diocese by helping them obtain needed prescription medications they otherwise couldn't afford.
I thank God each night for MediApps. What my condition could have been and what it is today, I would have been out of money. It's been a godsend. I think about such blessings when they come to me, and I think it's a God thing. This is a God thing.
Catholic Charities runs 3 warming centers now, but that wasn't the case just a few years ago, in 2017.
The warming center in Winona was really started by like a grassroots effort. And there was one particular woman, Cynthia Dozier actually, that really wanted to do something about the fact that people had no place to go who were homeless.
After weeks of meetings, the group decided to model its community warming shelter on the one in La Crosse, Wisconsin, run by the Catholic Charities there.
And Catholic Charities, you know, the work that they do, all the programming they do, I think they were looking to expand too into this area.
The group worked with the city, which didn't even have a zoning in place for a project like this.
Because the idea was that, you know, it was going to be just overnight, something that would just, at least for people to go to during the cold months.
The Winona Warming Shelter opened in January of 2017 in the basement of a local church with room for 10 beds, covered in donated bedding and staffed mostly by volunteers. Catholic Charities in Olmsted County collaborated to open a similar warming shelter in Rochester on a similar blueprint, a low-barrier, night-by-night shelter serving adults affected by homelessness. The pandemic brought along challenges that Catholic Charities saw as an opportunity. COVID-19 closed many of the public spaces people experiencing homelessness might use to stay warm or connect with services during the day. So the agency opened the Winona Community Day Center, providing shelter, meals, laundry, showers, and connections to mainstream resources for adults during the day. Catholic Charities has also partnered with Olmsted County to help people out of homelessness, staffing 2 supportive housing buildings with longer terms, case management, and other assistance. Catholic Charities has always addressed the unique needs of the time, from focusing on the care of orphan children to establishing a support system for refugees fleeing war and persecution, to bringing the diocese together with a harvest mass or providing warming centers for the unsheltered. Catholic Charities reaches out to the most vulnerable people in our communities. Today, our programs and projects address homelessness, mental health, adoption, immigration, prescription drug costs, parenting support, and advocates for adults and seniors to live their best lives. 75 years, with many milestones celebrated.
Wow, I'm just amazed at how Catholic Charities really has been an incredible witness in a time in our world when there's just a lot of upheaval, and we need the mission of Catholic Charities more than ever.
Catholic Charities will mark even more in the next 75 years by living its mission every day.